like a Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel, where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, where today we're taking a look at one of the many 2D fighters that was released on the system. I'm talking about the massive multi-format hit game known as Primal Rage, which came out on literally everything under the sun: the DOS, the Game Gear, the Game Boy, the SNES, the Mega Drive, the Jaguar, the 3DO, the PlayStation, and then finally in 1996, the Saturn version. Now, it came out in June of 96 in America and August of 96 over here in the PAL region. It didn't come out in Japan until March of 1998, but the fact of the matter was it came out after all the other versions. It came out 7 months after the PlayStation version, and even though the game sold 1.5 million copies worldwide in total, I can't imagine many of those sales came on the Sega Saturn.
This world will never again be the same.
So the storyline for Primal Rage is that a massive meteor strike has devastated the Earth and the human civilization has regressed all the way back to the Stone Age. A massive rainforest is now covering the land and the continents have all shifted in shape to that of a fire-breathing dinosaur skull. The planet is now known as Earth, spelled U-R-T-H, by the survivors of this terrible ordeal. Now, there's 7 fearsome creatures which have strangely awoken from their deep slumbers within the earth, and they are now being worshipped as the gods by the surviving humans who've segregated into groups that worship each monster. Now, some of the monsters have got plans to just destroy the earth even further for their own benefit, and others want to keep the peace. I'm not going to lie, the storyline for this game is absolute crap, and if you were coming to the game looking for a wonderful story experience, Primal Rage is not going to give you it. So once you hit the main menu, you'll see you've got Start Game, In-Game Options, Options, and Statistics. Heading into our Options menu, you've got all the things like Music Test, changing the gore level, modifying the controls, turning the animations on or off. That is the FMV sequences in between each battle. Once you've seen them once, you'll probably want to turn it off because they do get a little bit repetitive. We can change the number of rounds, difficulty, 2-player handicap, all standard stuff for fighting games. So like always, we need to talk about how it looks, how it sounds, content and lifespan, its gameplay, whether it's still worth playing today, and if it can make our PAL Sega Saturn top 10. Now obviously you can see from the visuals, it uses digitized sprites, and I feel by this point in time, mid-1996, these were starting to look dated. They didn't really have a long lifespan, in all fairness, within games, probably only 4 or 5 years at max. When they were originally used in the original Mortal Kombat games, I felt they looked really good, but by mid-1996 they were starting to look dated, and that's the case here. Whilst they don't look bad, they look relatively good in all fairness for digitized sprites, and they've got decent animations. They were just starting to look dated, and the backgrounds are pretty uninspiring. There is not a whole lot going on in any of them, and I feel that it does not take advantage of what the Saturn can do with 2D fighting games. In terms of performance, the game performs really well. There's no slowdown at all, and it runs perfectly fine. You've got special moves and you've got fatalities, but none of those look particularly impressive in all fairness. So I feel overall in the looks department, Primal Rage just leaves you with that little bit of disappointment. So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and this for me is probably the strongest aspect of the game. The sound effects are all of pretty decent quality. All of the hits and groans that your monsters make sound pretty good. Even the voiceover chat is of reasonably good quality. I haven't got any issues with the sound effects whatsoever. In terms of the music for the game, the tracks within the game are perfectly suited to fight the other monsters too. There is nothing memorable here, nothing that you're going to be listening to outside of the game, but at the same time, none of the tracks are truly terrible. They are quite samey, but they're not terrible. So what I will do is give you some examples so you can decide for yourselves just how good you think the music within Primal Rage is. So moving on to the gameplay next, I'm going to talk about the screen layout first, because your character has a health bar and also a brain health bar. Now when the brain health bar depletes, your character will become dizzy. They're not defeated, but they are prone to being hurt further. You need to wheel the D-pad to get out of that. Now when your health is depleted, you will of course die. If it's the final round, then your opponent can potentially pull a fatality off on you. And all of this is absolutely fine. In terms of gameplay itself, it's got a very similar control scheme to a Street Fighter game, upper and lower attacks, weak, medium and strong for both, and that is absolutely fine. The game plays relatively well, it's quite responsive, and I've got no issues with the standard gameplay of Primal Rage. The issues arise for me when you're trying to pull off your special moves and your fatalities, because in a normal standard fighting game you'll usually input your directions and then press a punch or kick button, or perhaps both, to pull off your special move, and that is what you would expect. Unfortunately in Primal Rage it employs an opposite mechanics where you have to hold the punch or kick buttons and then input the direction. Now in theory that might not sound so bad, but when you're holding down a punch and a kick button or whatever it may be, your character is stationary, they're not attacking and they can't move, and you're trying to then input the command to do the move, and this can be quite frustrating in my opinion. A lot of the time you'll get attacked when you're trying to pull off your moves, and it is just infuriating. What is even worse is when you're trying to pull off your fatalities, because if you don't time the presses of the punch and kick buttons accurately enough, then you will inevitably do a punch or do a kick, knock your opponent over, and you won't be able to pull off your fatality. And that for me is the biggest frustration in terms of the gameplay. I feel overall the standard gameplay is fine, but the way that the special moves and the fatalities have been implemented, it's a massive downside for me. I find it annoying and needlessly frustrating. I don't know why they chose to do it, but they did, and for me it brings the gameplay down a massive peg. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and from a one-player point of view, the game is very underwhelming. It simply has an arcade mode and a training mode. There are only 7 characters to pick from, which I feel is absolutely unforgivable for a game that's coming out in mid-1996. Whilst each character does have a few special moves to do and some fatalities to do as well, the instruction manual doesn't actually tell you all of the characters' moves, so you're either going to have to try and guess or look them up online if you want to figure them all out. There has been FMV sequences added over previous versions of the game, but in all honesty, they add absolutely nothing to the game, and once you've seen them once, you'll probably want to turn them off in the menu, because for me they just make the game more frustrated and add more loading times. Yes, the games had ending sequences added for the characters as well, but these are just as poor as the FMV sequences in between the battles when it's introducing a new character. I feel they don't add anything whatsoever to the game. So in terms of a one-player experience, the game is very underwhelming.
You can endure the torture, but there are plenty of humans. While practicing her arcane arts, she will discover a land.
There is a cheat menu that can be easily accessed with a code, which gives you a few more options to switch things up a bit, but it doesn't really add a whole lot. In terms of 2-player content, there are a few more modes of play, because you can have a standard 2-player battle, you can have a tug of war, and you can have an endurance match. Now these do sound interesting, but they're really nothing special. Endurance is simply a 4-on-4 team battle, and a tug of war means a 1-on-1 match where you have one giant health bar at the top of the screen and you have to deplete it all the way to the other side to be victorious. Now the match will continue until one person does this. You don't have your standard health bar, but that really is it in terms of 2-player additional content. The game simply doesn't have much lifespan in my opinion. The fact that the 1-player modes are so limited and the 2-player modes are really just there for novelty value. There's nothing really long term that this game can give you. So in terms of lifespan and content, the game is very disappointing. So like always, that leaves us with our 2 final questions. Is Primal Rage still worth playing today, and can it make our PAL Saturn top 10? Well, you can probably guess my answers to both of those questions, because I'm going to tell you Primal Rage is definitely not worth playing today. I feel it was redundant upon release really, because there were so many other better fighting games in this by mid-1996 on the Saturn that there was just simply no reason to go out and buy Primal Rage. It doesn't have enough content. It's only got 7 characters. That is just absolutely shocking in my opinion. So in no way, shape or form would I recommend you go out and buy this game. In terms of can it make our PAL top 10, of course it can't. In fact, it's probably the second worst fighting game I've looked at on the system so far. Only Battle Monsters springs to mind that is definitely worse than this, in all fairness. But like always, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone. Did you get Primal Rage upon its release for the Saturn? And do you think more highly of it than myself? Let me know with a comment down below. And like always, I'll be back in the near future with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.
By pain and torment of the cataclysm, Diablo escapes from his fiery prison to conquer the planet, to torture, to burn everything on Earth.